Okay, so today we're going to look at project planning, understanding the needs of your beneficiaries, and looking at the problems that we're trying to solve. So what we're going to do is we're going to, at the beginning now, we've done introductions, we're going to do a little bit of work of understanding needs assessment and problem analysis, and look a little bit at the methods of collecting the data. And then hopefully at 11:45 or maybe a few minutes later, we'd like to go into group work and then to do some feedback into the main room that we're in, the main chat room. Okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is ask you a question. When is it important to do a needs assessment and a problem analysis, and why? Holly, are we expecting responses to this question now? Sorry, I apologise.
Yeah, if anyone's got any ideas, if you just feed it into the chat box,
Yeah.
Take yourself off mute and to tell us any thoughts.
So when do you all think it's important to do a needs assessment or problem analysis, and why?
Probably at the start of the project, if I can venture a guess, because it directs the project, and yeah, it helps to think about the needs you're trying to address probably before you get started, which is a challenge, but I think, yeah, probably at the start of the project.
Good, and Akram is saying exactly the same, before planning any new activity or intervention. Anyone else have any ideas?
There's a message from Danson and from Beatrice as well in the chat box.
Okay, so Danson again is saying, well, before the start of the project, this will inform what you want to do and how you will do it. And then, as Beatrice has said from Uganda, at the planning point. So I think we're all talking about at the beginning of the project, yes? I think one question we have to think about is, what if we haven't done it? Can we do a needs assessment? Do any of you think we could do a needs assessment even if the project has started and we forgot to do it or didn't have the resources or the capacity to do it at the beginning? Do you think it would be okay to do it later into the project?
Yes, I can answer to that. I think it's important as well to analyze while you are in the project, because you can start and then dynamics might change. People might come in, people might go out, other factors, they're not necessarily internal factors, they might be external factors, and they'll require us to assess where we currently are, what's left to be done, and how we can get to what's left to be done. So it's the analysis should be done throughout the project, not just at the beginning stage. When you're checking your milestones, you need to assess as well, and then towards the end. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Well done. I think it's, and if we didn't do it at the beginning and we've realised that we should have done it, we can, of course, do it in the process of the project. But I agree with you, we need to keep making sure that we're providing the right services and the right programme. Thank you. Yes, Danson is also saying needs assessment is ongoing sometimes since realities change. And of course they do change. And since human beings are creative, new needs arise. And of course, every time we're working in a project, new needs do arise just because we start the thinking in the projects. And Hannah's also saying at every stage, and Akram again is saying a major changes arise. It's good to consider doing a new needs assessment or redoing the same assessment, just revisiting our assessment. Okay, should we move on, Holly? Brilliant, thank you all for your input. And if anyone has any other ideas, then do pop them into the chat box. We can share them later. So these are feedback from at the end of projects from some of the Penn centres. From Zambia, the feedback was, with the benefit of hindsight, we would have spent more time and resources learning what the young people really want, really like, and really want. And the Zambia project, they ran some workshops in schools promoting creative writing and speaking in indigenous languages. And what the centre wanted to do was reintroduce the mother languages, especially in early learning, as an opportunity to promote creativity in the local language or mother language. So they set up an indigenous language creative writing competition. They spoke to stakeholders and community groups throughout the project to share best practice and to discuss the successes. The project was important, but they do feel they should have spent more time, resources learning what the young people really wanted. So that's important to think why we should have done a needs assessment. There's also a feedback from a project in Pen Afrikaans, creative writing workshops in rural areas of South Africa where literacy levels are low, and the aim of the project was to help to change the perception of the Afrikaans as a language of the oppressor by sharing the stories of rural Black Africans communities. And the feedback from that was to best suit the interests of the participants, the envisaged project was adapted in both content and outcome as we went along. So as you were all saying earlier, we should continually assess as we go along within the projects. In Central Asia, Penn Central Asia, there was a program of visiting lectures in universities in North and Southern Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, in continuation of Central Asia's previous program of summer schools, visiting lectures aimed to equip students with an understanding of their human rights and to encourage a love of literature. And their feedback was, if another centre wants to do the same project, it must first examine the human rights situation in the country or the region to make the programme, which just goes to show how important it is we understand the context within which the programmes are being made. Alie, would you like to speak to the next one from Sierra Leone?
Ali might not have sorted out the sound on his.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ali, please forgive me if I'm not saying it correctly, because it's your project, not mine. But we observed at first that some community members did not want their children to attend out-of-school literacy programs. Parents and guardians needed the children to complete house chores and find money for family livelihoods. However, we called a community meeting and raised awareness on the importance of reading and literacy activities and how they can change the lifestyle and expectations of the children. So during the needs assessment, they also gave information, which is a very powerful way of doing that. The project was a community-based reading and debating program with a mobile library service as the basis for reading and debating activities, such as performances, creative writing and reading. So it's about speaking to the right people at the beginning of the project and throughout the project. Okay, any questions or thoughts? Thank you for all the messages that are coming up on chat. We will capture those.
There's a good, interesting comment from Danson.
Okay. Danson, do you want to speak to it a little bit?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. When you ask this question, when do we do needs assessment, it sounded so obvious that we do it before the project starts. But thinking about it again, we realize that one, of course, does it at the beginning of the project, but also during the project. In our prison writing project, we discovered, we did not know, none of us has been to prison as an inmate. Yeah. We did not know that soap and detergent was the most sought after thing, more than food apparently. Wow. More than food. I think because of the filthy conditions of the prison. So people exchange lots of money for soap and lots of money for other things and so on. So we discovered that in fact, instead of giving the inmates soda and other fresh drinks, they actually needed soap more than this. And so we started giving some, we would ask them, so what do you need? Do you need fresh drinks? Because in our we had fresh drinks. Do you need fresh drinks or do you need soap? And most of the time they would actually say they needed soap. And that means that next time we are planning another project like this, we shall need to think about this carefully, meaning that needs assessment can also be done at the end of the project for two reasons. One, to give the limitations of the current project that is ending, but also to inform the next project that is coming. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dancer. That's really good feedback. And interesting that we wouldn't have known about the need for soap in prisons. Okay. Okay, Holly, shall we move on? Okay, so what is this thing called needs assessment? And a discovery of the phase of a project during which the project team does an in-depth research in order to gain a complete understanding of the situation and of the needs before we start the project. This phase ensures that the project is outcome focused and that the project is designed around its users and participants. It should be carried out at the beginning of the project and then revisited, as you all said earlier, throughout the project lifespan in order to adapt and improve based on new findings. Does anyone have any questions about that definition? Should we move on, Holly? If everyone seems, I'll just put the hand up. Okay, what do we mean, or what's the definition of the problem analysis? Problem analysis is normally conducted with different stakeholders, target community members, and the project team all together, and is designed to achieve consensus on detailed aspects of a problem or a challenge. It involves identifying different problems and seeking as a group to look for cause and effect relationships between the problem and how we're going to solve it. The problem analysis often ends up with a problem tree, which illustrates not only how problems are interlinked, but also what might be the root causes of the problem. Any questions or thoughts on that statement? No? Shall we move on? I think the key thing at this initial phase is listening to the right people and asking the right questions. And to do that, we need to think about what methods we would use to collect the information from these people. So, to move on, hi, great. So the methods that we can use, and I'm sure all of you know these very well, and possibly I suspect you've all used them as well. So there's direct observation, what we see around us, what we're observing in the beneficiaries' lives and environment. We can use questionnaires, which obviously need to be tested and reviewed. We'll look at that in a minute. Consultation with persons in key positions or with specific knowledge, as with Danson's comment about soap being used in prisons. It would have been important to speak to possibly somebody who works in the prison before you even started the project and ask them, well, what is the most valuable thing that you could provide to people in prison? Review relevant literature. Always remember that people have already done some of the things before you, and often things have been written about them, not just in your own project, but in other projects and other countries, and we can all learn from each other. So it's important to look for the relevant literature that is related to the same problem or task that we want to perform. Interviews, I'm sure you've all done interviews, and how you do interviews, we'll look at that later. Focus group discussions, often very good with groups of people where you just want to gather lots of information, but it doesn't have to be specific. It's more about different people's ideas and them feeding off each other a little bit. Workshops are very useful, particularly for doing the problem tree analysis, and we will look at that in a few minutes. There's different assessments, different types of assessments, surveys. We can do surveys with our beneficiaries. And then, of course, there's obviously the records and report studies that have always been done before us. But it is important, as Jorn has said, how important it is to listen to the beneficiaries and then give them what they need. Okay, so we're going to today look at 3 selected methods just to do a little bit more insight into. There's all the others before, but we're just going to do 3 now. That is the journalistic approach, which is writing an essay or an article to do your research, which I suspect many of you know how to do that better than I do. Interviews, informal or formal interviews, and then mapping with partners, what is known as the visual approach. What's really important with all of these methods is that you speak to the right people. Who is the project for? Who are you aiming to make change happen for? And who are the people that will help make this change happen? Is everyone okay so far? Yeah, shall we continue? Okay. So the first method, this writing for a reader, or what is known as a journalistic approach, is you need to summarize the problem on 1 page. Be as detailed as necessary, but also as concise as possible. Don't make it so long that people get bored by the 3rd page. Be creative, be innovative, but also be robust as you would if you were carrying out a piece of investigative journalism. And then include multiple sources of information in your written summary, because you often, if it's only from one person, people will question the validity of your information. Okay, Patricia has said she likes the part on needs assessment where it reads, when conducting a needs assessment, the group has to consider the direct link between the intervention and the effect or outcome. Sometimes an outcome can have more than one contributing factor, and some can be outside a programme's intervention. Good. And we'll look at that in a little bit. We'll look at the problem tree. So any questions on writing or using the journalistic approach? No. Okay, shall we move on? Interview as many people as necessary and make sure you're interviewing the right people. It's really important that when you're interviewing, you don't interview everybody. Sometimes it's too many, and then you've got too much data, and the problem you will have with that data is actually if you have too much data, it's going to be a real problem for you to analyze. And make sure you're interviewing the right people.
Just before we go on, Anne, Elisha just raised his hand.
Oh, Elisha, yes, please, sorry.
No.
Hi, Elisha.
Yes, yeah, well, I just wanted to ask a question on, like, when you're doing the needs assessment there, how do you deal with the idea that, say, for instance, you're developing a questionnaire, how do you deal with the idea of you having preconceived ideas of a problem that you're trying to deal with? How do you deal with that thing, removing your own perceived ideas about the problem? Do you develop the questionnaire? How do you do the assessment independently, away from preconceived ideas?
Oh, okay, I think when you develop your questionnaire, you test your questionnaire before you start the actual survey, before you start collecting the data. So test your questionnaire with people who may or may not be part of your project to test your own preconceived ideas. If you do that, you should be able to provide a questionnaire that isn't filled with preconceived ideas. Test your question and your thinking first. Does that answer your question? Alicia?
Yeah, sure, yeah, it has been answered.
Great. Okay, it's about testing the questionnaire. I think there's a couple of questions in chat. Jorn, were you asking if it could be a focus group or random selection? Jorn?
Yeah, yes, I hear you. So, yeah.
Okay, so the focus group is, how do you choose your focus group? You could do it randomly. You could just have a random selection of people and put them into a focus group. However, one of the weaknesses with that will be that often in focus groups, if you have people who are comfortable with speaking in front of each other, you'll get a more comprehensive feedback. So I would say random selection is probably not the best method for a focus group.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is the idea from our team. So yeah, I hope everybody and they have their own idea how to make things happen better and better.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think the problem with random selection is you may have people who don't want to speak publicly in front of each other.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so it may be better not to do that. But I do know of programs where people have done random selections and they've worked. So
Yeah, because some people they want to protect their safety.
yeah, true. Alec, it's interesting your question about who you target. I think you do need to target the right people, but I think you have to think, who are the right people? So
Yeah,
if you want to do, if you say want to do a writing group, you want to set up a writing club for young people, obviously the right people are the young people. However, you're absolutely right that you may have to also do a group of the parents of the young people, because they will also have a balanced view, and it may be the school as well. So when I say the right people, I don't only mean the beneficiaries themselves, but the right people around them to make sure that you get a balanced view. Is that okay? Yeah, can we move on? I hope that answers your question, Alec. Okay, so I just did a little kind of summary or some tips really for interview techniques. I think you have to prepare yourself in advance and make sure you have enough time. There is nothing worse than finding when you're as a recipient of an interview, if the person interviewing you suddenly cuts it short in order to, because they've got to go on and do the next one. So make sure you've got enough time and you're well prepared before you start. I think it's important to develop an interview guide and test your questions, as I said earlier. I think you should consider cultural and power dimensions of the interview situation. Think about if you're dealing with government people or if you're dealing with children, how the power dimensions from yourself can influence the way that they respond or how they speak to you. You should be welcoming and build a rapport with your respondents so that they feel comfortable of sitting with you and talking with you. You should talk less and listen more, something many of us, particularly me, we forget to do. You should allow yourself to adjust the interview guide. So if the questions you're asking are not getting the answers that you want, then you may have to adjust the interview guide. Be prepared to handle unanticipated emotions. Sometimes when you're interviewing people, they suddenly will give you lots of things you hadn't expected, and you need to be able to handle that. It's really important. You should be able to transcribe the interview as soon as possible afterwards so that you still have it fresh in your memory. And you should check the information you have is accurate. Ali, your question about getting consent from government and setting up clubs in schools, you're absolutely right. That would be one of the right people to speak to. That's no question at all. Any thoughts, or does anyone have any better interview technique tips than I do? Because you've all done this before, I think. Anyone?
Hi.
Yeah.
I would like to comment on someone's question. Someone had asked about focus group discussions as one of the tools that you use when interviewing people. The key thing about focus group discussions is, I think, looking at your context, or the context of that particular community, the community you want to work with. The cultural context. Yeah. For instance, you have a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law in one group. The daughter-in-law may not be open. They might not tell you exactly what is on the ground because of she would be afraid of the father-in-law. Husband and wife, sometimes the wife will not be open because of the husband. So you need to really be wise when choosing who you want to be part of the focus group that you have chosen. Thank you. I think that's the comment that I wanted to give.
That's brilliant, Wesi. Thank you. I think you're right. It's so important that everybody in the focus group discussion feels comfortable to speak out loud. I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for that advice. And anything on interview techniques, or shall we move on? Probably need to move on with time. Okay. So this is when we're in groups. We might want to start thinking about developing a problem tree. You would do this in a workshop or a group of people together, where what you would want to do is, if you look at this tree, the main problem is the trunk of the tree, the main problem you want to solve. If you think about the Penn Zambia experience, promoting creative writing, the main problem would have been probably that people were not using the mother language. So the main problem would have been that. And then we would have looked, in that group, you can discuss what were the causes. Why do people not use, the main question for me is always why, but why do people not use local languages? And then you can start to come up with different causes for that main problem. And then you can also look at the consequences, because they don't use the local language or the mother language. What are the consequences to the loss of that language in this country? What would be the consequences of losing the capacity to use a local language? Patricia has just commented on, going back to the interview tips, that an interviewer has to make sure that the interviewee does not stray away from the topic under discussion. Such a good idea. Yes, you're right. And maintain eye contact, which is part of that rapport. And sometimes a recorder is very handy, you're right, when interviewing, because it's easier to go back and transcribe. The important thing is to ask people permission to use the recorder, because in some cultures people don't like recording their voices. So, but that's a great suggestion or tip, Patricia. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're gonna, that's the problem tree as a concept. If we look at the next slide, this is the problem tree. This is how we would map it. So the core problem in the middle, and then you would look at what are the effects from that project. There's two primary effects, and then what, but after that, what happens, and then the secondary effects. And from the core problem, we've got primary causes, what causes that, and then what were the secondary causes that cause the primary causes. Any questions on the visual mapping of a problem tree? Have any of you done problem tree analysis? Many of you been involved? Maybe people could put up their hand and say they have or they haven't.
Personally, I have, but every time I listen to it, it sounds very new. So
I think sometimes I feel that too, Danson. Okay, do you want to? So let me just see. Oh, people are putting chats up now. Good. So. Okay, so some people have. Beatrice says she hasn't. Okay, so what I was wondering is if we could have a little go of starting. It's obviously very difficult on a webinar like this, but I thought we could go into some groups and have a little go at thinking through how we would go about these methods. So what I want to do is, in groups, to discuss any challenges or successes you've encountered when using the methods listed. And I'll get Holly to show us that list again so that we can capture it. And what would be really good to hear from all of you, oh, there they are. There's the different methods for collecting data. What went well, and some of you have already given me some hints of how to do it better, and that's from what you've learned. What challenges did you find? What challenges did you face when you were using these methods? And important, what lessons have you learned that you could share back to everybody else in the group? Jorn has asked a question about secondary effect. I think the secondary effect is that if we think about the effect on low literacy levels in a country, that would be the main problem in the country would be the literacy levels. The effect of that could be that girls or boys or girls don't go to school or can't go to school. That would be the main effect. The secondary effect could be that the family just can't afford to send the children to schools. So you just keep looking, you keep asking that question, but why, but why, but why? But why don't they go to school? Because the parents can't afford to send them, or because the children have to work to raise money for the family, or the girls have to do childcare, or they have to collect water. All those are secondary. The actual issue is they're not the first problem is that the problem is they're not. There's a low literacy level. The primary cause of that is they're not going to school. The secondary cause is why they're not going to school. Is that clear? Does that answer your question, Jorn?
Yeah, it is the same second data or the same with...
No, it's secondary cause. Think of the word cause. So if the problem is low literacy, the main cause is that girls don't go to school or boys don't go to school. The secondary cause is why don't they go to school? What's the reason? That's the secondary cause. Okay, so clear?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So when you're in your groups, I want you to discuss whichever of those different methods you've used, and then you need to choose one person. We're not going to use mural like we did last time. We're just going to ask you to quietly talk amongst yourselves, and then one person to feed back in plenary. We're going to give you 20 minutes to have your discussions. Maybe you can choose 1 or 2 topics, maybe just 1, whichever you like. Holly and I won't come into your groups unless you want us to. If you want one of us to come and help you in the group, then please maybe ask Holly on chat, or myself on chat, and one of us will join the group. Are you there, Holly? Oh, have we lost Holly?
I am. No, I'm here.
Oh, we lost you.
No. So in a moment, I'm just going to set up your rooms, and then in a moment, you'll see a little box pop up that says which breakout room you're in. So if you could try and remember the number of breakout room that you're in, for in case you get your connection goes and you have to be put back into the room. And then, yeah, you'll go into groups of 6. If you did want Anne or I to come into your room, if you have any questions, then as Anne said, you can just alert us by the chat box, or you can just, there's a little button at the bottom of your screen that should say call the facilitator. Should be everyone.
Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just one person from each room to feed back. So if we could start with the room that Danson was in. I'm assuming you put somebody or nominated somebody to feed back from your room.
Thank you, Anne. We nominated Yon. I don't know whether he's ready to. Yon, are you able to? We had some connection problems. So I don't know whether he's able to. But maybe I could just say what I put down. So we went for the focus group discussions, and what went well, we said that focus group discussions bring to the table different viewpoints because people are able to give different viewpoints, and because of that, the researcher is likely to get more insights into the problem than when you're talking to just one person.
Brilliant.
Then we said that the discussions are very good with checking veracity. How true is this issue? Because there are many people together, people are very careful what they are saying, and they will not say something that is not correct. So we said that focus group discussions are very good in checking the veracity of the information, the truthfulness of the information, or the truthfulness of the problem that is being discussed. And then we said that the researcher is able to gather a lot of information in a short time. Because you have like these 6, 7 people there, you're able to gather a lot of information in a short time. However, from the experiences of the members, there were some challenges, and the biggest challenge that came from the discussion was suspicion among the members, especially in countries that are politically turmoil.
Yeah.
People ask, but why are you interested in this kind of information? Or why have you asked us to be the ones to discuss this kind of information? So people fear for their safety, and because of that, there is suspicion, and because of the suspicion, the information you get might not be maybe the kind of information that you should be getting. People might give particular responses that they feel are politically correct. And I think Wezi was explaining something about the context of enunciation, the context in which people speak. We also said that some people, as Anne said, some people talk quite too much. Our chairperson, Isaiah, was very good with that. He was cutting us short when we were explaining. Some people talk too much. So you might have a group that is not balanced. So out of 6 or 7 people, you have 1 person dominating the group or 2 people dominating the group. And this brought us to the lessons, 4 key lessons. Number 1, that the researcher needs to explain his or her purpose as clearly as possible to avoid suspicion from the people. And number two, that the researcher needs to keep the discussion relevant so that the people who talk too much are not distracting others. And I think Patricia from Malawi said something like this in the chat. Number three, that the researcher needs to probe for veracity, for truthfulness. The researcher needs to keep probing, asking why, how, that everything that is given becomes as clear as possible. And number four, that the researcher needs to have a very good sense of what he or she wants to achieve. Without this good sense, the discussion might end up becoming another nice talk. Then you ask yourself, hey, what have I got about the problem analysis? And you find that you have got nothing. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Danson, and thank you, Group One. Those are fantastic suggestions and recommendations, which, as you know, this is being recorded, so you'll all have a link to that recording so you can capture them yourselves back in your workplace. So if we could move to room 2, I think it was Beatrice was in that room who has been nominated to present your discussion. I think, Katrina, it was your room.
CMO is presenting.
CMO, you're going to present.
Yes, I am this
Yes,
time.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so our group, we had from four different people. So we were able to get 4 different methods that have worked. So I tried to summarize them, but each time I'll list out the points. So the 4 methods that worked were direct observation, consultation, interviews, and focus group discussions. Some challenges that were mentioned from these methods. The first was not being able to get all the information you need from participants. In a situation where you consult from the authorities or people who are in charge, you're not able to know the needs of the beneficiaries because they're only giving you one part of the story. You know, this is what we think people need as opposed to what people actually need. You know, so it works well for data collection, but not necessarily the exact information that you need. So you get what you want, but not for who you want it for. So that really brought up issues for direct observation and consultation, because in direct observation, you're not getting what people need, but what you observe, what you see. So it's good in one hand, but on the other hand, it's not really effective as to bring about what your beneficiaries need. So those are the challenges for direct observation and consultation. Now for the interview parts, we got that from Penn, Nigeria, where there was a program on literacy in a rural area to introduce students to the reading culture. So students were interviewed as well to know what their needs were, but one group were omitted, which are the facilitators. So they faced challenges with funding, with the facilitators needing to be paid or expecting some form of payment. So if they had been included from this get-go to know what their needs or what they think, the PEN members would have known that these people, that these people also need to some form of payment or motivation as well. So that was a minor challenge that they faced in the project. And then for focus group discussions, which everyone thought was actually a good idea, but their problem was everyone wanting to participate. Everyone wants to speak, everyone wants something to say, and there's never enough time for everyone. So in as much as it's actually very good to get information you need, if the timing is not really managed or the venue or the number of people, it becomes chaotic to handle. So our lessons learned from everything is that we should always involve all players when we're handling a project. So not just the beneficiaries or the authorities, but other players, other service providers, facilitators, teachers, everyone who will be among the projects. We need to hear from them first so that we have everyone's needs. So that's basically what, you know, and then Katrina also mentioned that we need to have a balance. That's how we summarize it. So balance the analysis and balance the needs of everyone.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for group 2. And as I said, that will all be in the recording.
Okay.
And then room 3, I think it was Patricia's room, who had agreed to present from that room. You on mute, Patricia.
Okay. Yes, I think I'm the one who was chosen. I'm still trying to bring myself on the big screen. I don't know how to do that. In our group, we didn't have much time, but I think we discussed 2 issues. First of all, we discussed needs assessment and how do we go about to identify the needs of a project, and the few contributions that were made were that in our PIN center, sometimes we don't follow the problem tree that you just showed us here, but then we go on to tackle the problems that are very obvious.
Yeah.
We go and say, well, this is the problem that a lot of people have identified. And so let us go ahead and channel our resources in addressing this particular problem. And after that, we spent some time looking at what are the challenges that we come across when we are conducting these research projects. And 2 issues came out frequently to say that one is sometimes there aren't enough resources to enable researchers to go back to the beneficiaries to try and assess the impact of the interventions. Secondly, lack of time of the intended beneficiaries to be involved in our programs. And another problem another challenge that was also mentioned was some researchers go out in the field with some preconceived ideas. They already have expectations of what they'll get on the ground. Yeah, apart from that, have I missed out anything? I think those were the 2 issues that we dwelt much on. Going about identifying a problem and what are some of the challenges. And we used Zimbabwe as our case study. So we heard from Elisha, who shared with us their experiences. I think that's what I can report from our group.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patricia. That's really comprehensive and clear.
Thank you.
Well done. Anybody else got any comments they want to feed back quickly?
There's a couple of people with their hands up, Anne. There's
okay.
Wezzy and Aliyu, who've both got their hands.
Wezzy, do you want to add something?
Yes, just to add on what Patricia has said, I think one more challenge that she might have forgotten to mention is the expectation part of it. Expectation from the participants. If you don't give them something, for example, money, they will not give you the information because they want you to do that and you don't have the resources to hand out. Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Wezzy. That's very true. Thank you for that feedback. Aliyu, you have a comment to make? Aliyu? Do you have a comment? Your sound is not working.
Give a minute.
Ali, you can write in the chat box and we can read it out.
Yeah.
Should we continue and then we can come back to Ali's comment at the end?
Okay. So I think we've had feedback from the 3 groups. Thank you all very much. Holly is recording it, so you'll be able to hear the feedback. I think we're now going to ask you to do some homework. Exciting. Are you going to put the slide up, Holly, or shall I just tell them the homework? I just say?
Yeah, maybe just say, Anne.
Okay, so what we'd like you to do is we'd like you all to try and use one of the tools and then write to Holly at hollystrauss@penninternational.org. Write to Holly how you got on with it so we can share it with everybody. What I'd really appreciate is if some of you could use the problem tree, try and use that tool in your own organizations to look at a project that you're thinking of doing. That would be excellent, and then let us know how you get on with it. Holly, is there anything else?
Sorry, the timeline, when do we have to submit this work?
Just by the next webinar. So the next webinar will be in 3 weeks' time. So if you could do it in the next 3 weeks and submit it to us, then we can do a bit of feedback during that session.
Yeah.
And Hannah just messaged on the chat to ask if I can send the presentation, and I absolutely will do. I'll send the presentation along with the video recording of this session. And we'll also put in a few other resources to do with problem and needs assessment so that you've got some other stuff there. But if you have any further questions as well, prior to carrying out any of the methods or during or following, then you're more than welcome to contact me and Anne, and we can help you kind of individually and one-on-one.
So the next one is in 3 weeks' time, which is the 20th of August. Sorry, who?
Hi, Musa.
Hi, Musa.
Can I come in? Yeah. We have
Musa.
Musa, could you write in the chat box? We can't hear you.
It's very slow. Maybe you see Ali is complaining from Sierra Leone. Can you just, what she just said, you just read that? I'm seeing the problem tree. Yeah. Okay, now, so that's it. I'm sorry.
Musa.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm getting on.
Musa, your internet connection is quite bad, so we can't hear you that well.
Yeah.
So maybe just write in the chat box and we'll be able to read out.
It's
I think there's a problem.
Musa, there's a problem with your sound.
Good, good.
Musa.
Yeah, the problem is clear. It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay. Yeah.
I'm just going to mute you, Musa, because I think there's something wrong with your sound. But please do write in the chat box and we can read out anything that you have to say.
Yeah, but I get you very clearly. When you speak, I get you very clearly. I'm getting you very clearly. Yeah, I think you are getting me now.
That's good.
Yes, we are now.
Yeah. That's okay. We move on.
We'll move on. Okay. I think we're coming to the end of our session.
Great.
Does anybody want to say anything quickly before we close?
Elisha has asked if I will write about the homework in the chat box, but maybe better than that is I'll put information about it on the email that I send to you all with all the resources and the presentation and the video.
No, that's fine, Holly. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Good. Thanks, Holly. Okay. Thank you all for all your hard work. Thank you for listening to me blabbling on. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I really thank you. I look forward to seeing you all again on the 20th.
20th of August is the next one, and it will be about building your membership. So there'll be different challenges faced in building your membership, and how we'll have some kind of guest speakers from other Penn centres, and probably ask a couple of you to kind of feed in some ideas as well. So yes, that will be on the 20th of August. Look forward to seeing
sorry, Holly, I hope there won't be any collision with the women's conference, the women committee.
yeah. Remind me when that is, Danson.
Sorry?
Remind me when that is.
No, I don't remember, but it's
I'll double check and I'll make sure they're not happening at the same time, because yeah,
okay.
You're right. There'll be people who want to attend both.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing.
I think, sorry, it's August 23rd. The lockdown lock-in, August 23rd.
Oh, great. So yeah, it will be before that. It'll be 3 days before that.
Brilliant.
On the 20th. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. It was very nice to see all your faces. Thank you for contributing.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Patricia. I'm just seeing your face. I didn't see you earlier.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.